6 o'clock. Call this meeting to order. Can we get a motion for the minutes for November 6th and 13th?
I'll move that we approve minutes from select board meetings November 6th and November 13th.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, warrants 11P, reappraisal fund 4 and 10A.
I'll move to approve bills for payment warrants 11P, reappraisal fund number 4 and 10A.
I'll second it.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Nadir, would you like to come up to the table?
Sure, absolutely, thanks. So thank you for making a bit of time for me to come in. I think Mike will be here any minute, hopefully. So Mike and I, we're going around doing a bit of a listening tour. We're going to all the select boards in the Wyndham 4 district. And, you know, I get so many emails these days, but I much rather prefer talking to folks in person now because I can actually, you know, engage and ask more questions and all that. So I wanted to hear from you guys about, you know, what some of your concerns are coming into the upcoming legislative session. You know, I've gotten a lot of different information from folks around the area, and so just wanted to touch base and see how things are going in Dummerston more so, and see what ideas you might have. I can tell you a bit about what I've been working on, some of the more detailed stuff regarding the Judiciary Committee. You know, we recently passed a youthful offender bill.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, there he is.
Aye.
And there was a little bit of a loophole that they forgot to close, and so that was brought to my attention regarding domestic violence. And so I'll be working on that. Also, given some of the recent deaths and injuries of highway workers, AOT workers, I strengthened the bill regarding the move over law. So those are two things that I'll be pushing for specifically in the Judiciary Committee. And I know that in the broader picture, one of the first things we're going to be working on is the paid family leave bill and the $15 an hour minimum wage, as well as, I hope, cannabis commercialization. So that's what's on my mind going into the session. And Mike, I was just telling them that, you know, we're doing the listening tour, going around to all 3 towns and just giving them a tidbit of what I'm working on.
What?
I was giving them a
Listening tour.
Yes.
We work well together.
Yes, we do.
I do want to apologize to you guys right up front. Is we'd done emails about the meeting, and Friday I completely forgot to put it on the agenda. So I'm sorry to people out there that, you know, you guys were here without. You're under visitors, so it's more than welcome to speak and stuff. But we may have had people show up to ask questions, so I dropped the ball on that, and I just want to apologize to everybody for that.
And I think we can offer that if there's another time that it would work.
Right, if people.
Have a meeting, especially if there's a topic that comes up, we're certainly available.
Right, so I just, you know, so if anybody does have anything that they want to
Yeah.
ask, you know, give me a call or give the select board a call, and we can set something else up if that's necessary.
So it helps me to think about things, to hear what it is you're working on. So I wonder, Mike, if you can just kind of like run down a list of the things that you're focused on in the legislature.
Well, much as anything, I also want to hear from you.
Right, I understand that, but it also, I'm just saying for context, it's
Certainly
helpful.
big picture, things that we're looking at. What I'm hearing from a lot of people are concerned around healthcare and the costs. I don't know what your costs this year for insurance, what the increases were, but we're hearing from 10 to 25%, which is just not sustainable. And what we can do immediately is not clear. There's a growing sense that what we've done regionally, for instance with the RGGI compact, the regional greenhouse gas initiative, where we combined with 10 other states, and it's a cap and trade thing. We've been involved for 10 years now. That may be the way to go, because to change our system in Vermont by ourselves, we can't do it. But what we're seeing is the current systems are not working. Healthcare is again becoming inaccessible because of copays, deductibles, increases in premiums. So we have to watch our outcomes to see if this is affecting whether people are going in for services or waiting for them. Climate is something that is on a lot of people's minds too, and how it affects right here on the ground level. I know most towns have been going through the upgrades for their roads and drainage based on what we went through with Hurricane Irene. And I don't know how Dummerston, where you are in that process, but I know it's been a challenge for Westminster, and Putney is banging away at it too, but you know, we're increasing size of culverts, drainage ditches, and I mean, the reality is we're looking at storms of a greater magnitude and frequency than we've known before. I know, just talking to Jack Mannix this year, he said when he first started farming over at Walker Farm there, you could pretty much guarantee around mid-September, in that week you'd get a killing frost. And this year it was first week of October, and he's down by the river. Other people mid-October and later. I'm not saying individual weather events add to climate, but that's something over 40 years that we're seeing. And what we can do individually and collectively, I think is important. One of the things a lot of people are doing, and certainly your house is an example of what a lot of people are doing, but just the way we heat. We have a lot of good programs now to help people buy heat pumps. Heat pumps are, I went through my first winter. I went from burning 5 cords of wood to a little less than 1, which was to supplement the heat pump on the worst days. You know, you get down below 0. My back likes it. And the fact that we're hooked into the Green Mountain Power Grid, you know, their grid is 90% green. Their portfolio is 90% green. So we're making a difference there. It's also cheaper. From what I used to cut a couple 3 cords myself, buy a couple 3 cords, and when I look at what I was paying for wood in my time, it's cheaper to run the heat pumps too. And it's kind of nice to have the air conditioning in the summer. So that's something we've done a lot to help. We're subsidizing that. We put money into that. We had a big meeting last night. Nadir and I are both part of the Climate Solutions Caucus in the legislature, and we're clear that this is something we need to keep right on pushing. One of the things that we're going to keep trying to do, though, is to we don't have a public transportation system in Vermont, and we need one. Electric cars might be good for some people, but for most people, the cost of electric cars is just prohibitive. We can bring those down to a degree, but the reality is that that's not the only solution. We need a public transportation system, and that's why there's a plan among 10 states in the northeast of New England to create another regional compact, a cap and invest program it's called, where there would be a surcharge at the source, the dealers who are putting gas and diesel and heating fuel out there, and then that money would be pushed back to the states to use as they see fit. What we would like to do, since we don't have public transportation system is create one. And some of the things included in that are light rail to go up and down the Connecticut River Valley for us. And what that would mean is they have cars now that are trains that are basically 2 cars. They can go backward and forward without having to turn around. And then an Uber kind of feeder system to get people there. These are big picture items that we're looking at. Going back into the healthcare realm, 2 years ago we passed a bill to help us import prescription drugs from Canada. We're on track, but we've taken a little delay because what we found out is other states want to do this, and if we can do this collectively, we might have a better position to put that in. The final step of that, though, is to get some approval from the federal government. There have been signs since the election that this president says he wants to do something about the price of prescription drugs, and this would be something he could do. Whether he will or not, we'll have to see.
That's good. I mean, I just, I didn't want to,
So I have a very local question though, and this is a hot topic in Putney and Westminster, and I hope you're not having the problem with dogs that they are. We've had some horrible attacks on other dogs, people getting to the point where they are asking us to put something in statute, and it has to do with strict liability for, right now Vermont has what's known as first bite free. People are not held liable for attacks that their dogs perpetrate. It's something they can do at the town level as well, but what they're looking for is some help. So it sounds like you're not encountering that kind of thing.
well, I don't know.
And I'm glad. but,
I'm not sure that's the case.
It's something that they've been forced to take a look at, and at some point you may too.
Are we having a trouble with that? I mean, Zeke, you would be the one to say,
No.
not to that degree.
Right.
I haven't heard much about that in Dummerston either. Primarily Putney was the catalyst, and then I started hearing it happening in Westminster as well.
I mean, it's not that we haven't had any incidents, because there have been some, but
Yes.
Yeah.
But not
to that degree.
right.
Yeah. Well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But before we would do something, we'd certainly want to keep you in the loop on that too. I mean, this is one of those things right down to the ground level that's affecting some of the towns, so we want to be responsive to what's happening.
So it is kind of interesting to make the connection between the legislation, the legislature and the select board. It's not our typical conversation to talk about what's going on in Montpelier and sort of, I don't think that we as a group necessarily have our ear to the track in terms of all Dummerston residents and what it, making that connection between our town and Montpelier. So I'd actually kind of be interested if anybody has particular things that we feel like we want to pass on to Mike and Nadir.
No, I didn't know they were on the agenda, so I
Yeah, that's
Haven't
again my
put my-
mistake.
Thinking cap
yeah,
on.
yeah. So
But one of the things that I hope you know, that we're accessible. Probably email's the best way to do it, and I know when things come up in regards to agriculture, and I don't know if you're hearing any pushback. I don't know that you have big dairy farms in Dummerston now around the required agricultural practices that were put in place last year, but some of the bigger dairy farms are pushing back on some changes that have been made. I don't know that they're radical, but there's two regards. The first was that it's in regards to cleaning up our water. David Dean for years has been pushing for some of these things. The other thing is it works in regards to regenerative soil practices, and that's something in terms of carbon sequestration that makes a lot of sense. And if you haven't been hearing from people, that's a good thing. But if you do, we'd certainly be glad to talk to people about that. We think for the long run, these are actually good practices. There's flexibility. That's the other thing I wanted to say. One of the farms we heard from was Westminster Farms, Goodell's up in Westminster, Route 5. And one of the things they said was, well, nobody in Montpelier wants to listen to us. So we got the ag commissioner come down, and we had a meeting with a bunch of dairy farmers there at Westminster Farms, and they brought up the question of the dates that they had to have their corn chopped, fields cleaned, and then planted a cover crop. The point was well made that the dates that they were being expected to meet were the same as they were on the northern border, and that we really have a different climate down here. So the Secretary Tebbets said, we've got some flexibility around that. You want to put in for a waiver, we can probably get it for you, and they did. So that I think it shows you that things can work, and we can help move them along. So there are some considerations made.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask about on a completely different topic had to do with sheriff contracts in the town. I wasn't sure what the current situation is for Dummerston and contracting with the sheriff or the state police, but one of the conversations that I've had with Jeanette White, Senator White, recently was she's very adamant that we need to change the way we fund the sheriff departments in our state, because we kind of have a peculiar system. And so I was wondering how you folks might be feeling about your current sheriff contract, if there is still one in place. I'm not sure what the current status is.
We still have a sheriff's contract, and we put it it's in our budget. We're going through our budget right now, and we're gonna keep it the way it is at this point anyways. We're talking about leaving it the same. What is it, 290 hours a year we do with the sheriff's department? And
That's good.
And then the state police takes on the criminal part of it, so that saves our hours, keeping it away from the sheriff's department, giving it to the state police, because the state police do that.
Yeah, I've known Sheriff Anderson for a while, and I know he's got some really great hopes and aspirations for the sheriff's department in Windham County, and he really wants to grow it and actually provide jobs for a number of folks. So I was just wondering what the general vibe is regarding the status with them. So it's
We're pretty happy,
Good.
wouldn't you say?
They're very receptive when I'm the
That's great.
liaison.
great.
And so when I email him, he's usually emailing me back,
He is
or if
very
I call,
responsive,
very responsive. So I've been happy with the way it's been going.
Great.
Yep.
And would you say that for the most part, the sheriff's role in Dummerston is primarily about speeding and, sort of
Yeah,
keeping things,
Yeah.
that's, when we get
Couple other-
calls
yeah.
from residents who say, I'd like the sheriff a little more, in this part of town or that part of town, and so that's often the conversation that happens.
Something else we're hearing really across the state is the challenge of our first responders, local fire departments, of keeping enough people on staff. They're having a hard time.
On staff or volunteers?
Volunteering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've got over 24 on our volunteer fire department.
Yeah.
And we've got,
It's more than Putney.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
we've got I think it's 19 firefighter ones.
Yeah.
And so we're,
That's good.
and they're still trying to get more, so.
Yeah. So some of the concerns we're hearing is that, buying equipment is prohibitive. The costs of trainings are prohibitive, and so that we may be looking at ways to try and help with that. I don't know if that becomes a challenge here. Let us know, because I think.
Okay, we're letting you know. Anything you can do to help out is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough, with the volunteer fire department where, the town gives them a certain amount toward their operating budget, but then the same guys that are out there at
Yeah.
2 a.m. fighting a fire are selling pancakes on a Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So funding is definitely an issue.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's good to hear that you got enough people. Now, you don't have to, Putney has to answer to I-91 calls. Does Dummerston have to as well?
I've seen them.
There's
all there.
part of
Yeah.
Dummerston that's,
Yeah, okay, so.
Mutual aid.
That,
yeah.
Yeah.
that adds to your, to the job tasks.
I guess one of the things I would add is that we depend a lot on VLCT
Yeah,
as an incredible support for our work, and the structure that they maintain, you know, in the state, I think really helps the state function really well, you know, town to town. And I kind of see them as one of our main liaisons with Montpelier. So when they're engaged and speaking up, and they're speaking for us, and we're leaning on them to,
Yep.
you know, if something's confusing to us, they're the people we call. You know, we don't call you guys, we call them, because they're really
And then
well
they call
versed.
us.
And then they call you. But
they're very active and accessible. so
and
it's great.
I'm, you know, I'm just encouraging you guys to keep a real open ear and be very mindful
see
of
them.
their role in
They're
the
up
state.
there often,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
every day.
Our, the committee I sit on, the main committee is government operations. So they're in my committee a lot more, I think,
Yeah.
than yours, but
Yeah.
they're very accessible.
They're awesome.
Yeah.
And they do trainings, and, you know, they really keep us, and not just us, but also
Oh,
the
yeah.
town clerk and the treasurer, you know.
Yeah. And they've been very helpful in looking at these dog issues as well.
I'm sure,
'Cause
yeah.
it's not an isolated problem, and you don't have to go far to find that people have had some pretty awful stories.
One
No,
more
go ahead,
thing.
yeah, no, that's fine.
It's not exactly a question, but it's just a general topic that maybe folks might have some input on. But you know, outside the Judiciary Committee, I think a lot about the younger demographics of Vermont, and you know, I mean, you kind of broached the subject earlier about children, teenagers, young adults, in Dummerston specifically, and I was wondering if there are any thoughts about do we have more folks moving to Dummerston? Is our population going down, or I mean, and how does it relate to being in the orbit of Brattleboro, and where do we see ourselves in 10 years given our changing population? And I mean, I've said this to a number of folks, but a lot of people my age, early 30s, they want to live in places like Vermont. And just the other week, I was talking to an old friend from college, and he's now looking at buying a place in Vermont, and I'm telling him, buy a house in Dummerston. And so I guess I don't really have a question, but I was wondering what if you folks might have any thoughts on, where we might see ourselves in 5 years with our demographics and our population.
I know, I can't speak for the rest of you, but I'm getting older each year. So,
You are?
yeah, so I expect in 5 years, I'm gonna be 5 years older.
So, well, I have something to say, but I've been doing a lot of talking.
No.
So what were you going to say, Terry?
No, go ahead, Gerald.
I guess what I feel about Dummerston is that because we don't have any commercial center, we're very Brattleboro focused in terms of meeting our needs. And what doesn't happen is when new people move into Dummerston, there's no place to bump into them or no place to sit and have coffee, or so that's, to me, kind of a lack in terms of a magnet for new people. I think our school is awesome, and the school is very strong and attractive, and I think we've done things with our kindergarten that make it more feasible for parents to choose that over continuing with full-time daycare. So that's great. But I do think for Dummerston, and I don't know as the rest of the select board would agree with me, but organizations like BDCC are key to Dummerston because we don't have that center, and we become, in terms of economics, really linked with Brattleboro in a way that maybe Putney doesn't, because Putney has, and even Guilford now has, you know, the Algiers village, and so I think it's a little bit of a lack in Dummerston of not having a place where people would just bump into
I
somebody.
do agree with what you
new.
said about the school, though. I know that's, when I talk to other younger families in the area, that's always the number one draw. is
Absolutely.
The school.
Yeah.
And it was for
Really?
me as well.
Huh,
Yep.
there are some people that would disagree with you.
In what way? Why do you say that?
Oh, I mean, the whole Act 46, a lot of people in Brattleboro were saying that people in Dummerston were behind, and it's just interesting, you know?
That was nonsense too.
I think it was too, but a lot of it was said that should have never been said because it was not true.
Totally, yeah.
But
It
it was a real frustrating whole ordeal, and
I had to sit next to Jody Norman though while it was being said.
so yeah,
I was in the room when it happened.
Huh.
it's
Yeah, it was just not a finest hour.
But no, the school is great, and I went down to my son's parent-teacher conferences down to the high school, and one of the teachers, well, actually two of the teachers said right up front, without being asked anything, said how the kids from Dummerston come there much more prepared than any other town,
Oh, that's good.
and that was not. I didn't say anything to her, you know, she asked where we were from and I said that, and she said, well, that explains why, you know, he comes to class prepared, he's ready. And so that's been going on for years
I was
in
gonna
Dummerston.
say, I've heard the same
Years.
thing when my daughter was there and she
Years.
graduated in 2009.
Yeah.
And
Thinking
so,
that some of the teachers can just tell
Yeah.
the kids from Dummerston.
Yeah.
and so for anybody to ever say anything against Dummerston schools is just nonsense, and, you know, they have no place to speak.
Yeah.
Because their teachers in their own town are saying how great the students from Dummerston are when they come down there and prepared.
Your Dummerston scores right up near the top statewide, consistently. I have a warning flag to raise for you, and it has to do with internet and even copper line phones. One of the things we did last year, because there's a continued cry for people to have broadband to the last mile in Vermont. So we set up a process, and I hope we can talk about it another time, or that the towns start to talk to each other, to set up consolidated communication districts to create municipal telecom utilities. And there's a sense after 20 years that the companies that are in Vermont are not going to expand much beyond what they've done. And that if we really want to get broadband and cell service to the last mile, we have to figure out something to do. And what happened up in Norwich, they created what's now a 20-town telecom municipal utility that does provide broadband and cell service to the last mile of all those towns. So using that example, there's money now to do planning to create some more of these districts. And why this may be even important is we just found out recently that the Federal Communication Commission is giving companies that maintain copper line, which for a lot of Vermonters is all they have, an option to forego any more maintenance or establishment of copper lines. That if they have a plan that says they're going to be going in another direction, no matter, you know, pulling cables, then they don't have to worry about their copper lines anymore. There's a lot of Vermonters who that's all they have. And we're very concerned that, don't know if you've heard complaints about Consolidated, but I know I have. And that this may be a way for them to start to look in another direction. They want to expand. I mean, I think right across the river they're doing a big expansion of cable. I hope they're getting ready to do more of that here, but I'm not going to hold my breath. So anyway, we'll certainly be on the lookout to see what happens, but just as a heads up, we need to be aware of that. And the other thing is with those telecom districts, it may be something, and what it would be is not asking you necessarily to do something, but ask if there are people who would want to be on a committee. Another group that we work closely with, BDCC is part of this, but also the Wyndham Regional Commission. Chris Campany is heading up these efforts to start the planning for this, so he would be somebody you can contact.
So, Mike, I'm a little confused. So, are you saying that these municipal telecom companies, if a town is part of this municipal telecom group, the FCC has money to offer them?
The state does.
The state?
Yeah. The FCC has to do with the copper, but not with this. This is the state.
The state has money to offer these municipal groups, and so they're a good way for small towns to move forward with getting internet to the last mile?
It is. The first stage of this are planning grants.
Mm-hmm.
And to create the entities. And what they want to do is to make sure that they feel like larger groups, so they want to see different towns. Don't know that it needs to be as good as it did with EC Fiber in Norwich, where they have 20 towns, but it works.
Because certainly that's connected to bringing young people to the area.
That's
I mean,
one of the things.
I have friends that just moved up,
Yeah.
way above me, and one of the people moved, and she said, well, here I'm living in this place and I can't work at home. I have to go into town to work. She didn't even realize what it meant to only have dial-up.
Yeah.
And
you've talked
she just
about
couldn't
that.
even
It's
imagine
different.
not
have
opening
a-
her computer and having internet.
Exactly. I have a very close friend of mine. She lives in Boston, but she very desperately wants to live in Vermont, and she runs a successful business online, selling jewelry and making jewelry. But there are very limited places where she can live in Vermont. She wants to live in a rural area, but it would.
So I'd say
Her
it's
business,
pretty
so-
equal to schools.
Yeah.
For people moving. Is this house going to have internet? And how are the schools?
It is a selling point.
Yeah, absolutely.
No. And looking ahead to the future of Vermont, I think it bodes well if we can do this. And this is the plan we have, because we've come to terms with it. I have Southern Vermont Cable, but I think every year they maybe add about 10 customers.
Right.
I don't know if it's the same here in Dummerston, but what happens if they're a pretty small company? What happens if a pretty small family company? How much longer into the future are they going to be able to do this? So these are some long-term things, but it might be something to look into. And Chris Campany, I think, is the person over at Wyndham Regional who has more and better information about this.
Great.
Well, thank you guys very much, and I'm sorry I dropped the ball once again to everybody here and to everybody for not putting it on the agenda.
Glad I'm not the only one who does that. I'm in good company there.
There you go. So, well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
guys.
thank you very much for coming. Really appreciate your time.
And even though I made a joke about emails earlier, feel free to drop me an email if you have any questions or anything. We're both pretty responsive.
And good luck with your budget.
Right. So, road foreman's report. Did everybody get a chance to see that? Right on the top.
The surf pro.
Yeah, the Surf Pro.
Yeah.
That's about that. And I was talking to Lee about that, and he really thinks and I do too. After we saw the amount for it, that we get somebody else to look into that, because he didn't think it was as bad as the first pictures had showed, and he thinks this
I'd
is.
do it for this much.
There you go,
Go
right?
for it. I haven't gone up to inspect it yet.
It's not as bad, so.
Okay,
So that's that.
So not to go for this,
Right.
yeah.
get a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correspondence for information, anybody have anything there?
Pretty short.
Correspondence for discussion and or action. Geraldine, you were gonna do that, right? The report, the select board report, I thought,
Yeah, I think the deadline was December 10th, was it?
or 9th, I think.
Ninth.
December 9th?
Yeah, I think it's the 9th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Louis, I'll write it, but I do want to send it to you and
Yeah.
have you
Sure.
make sure that you're good with it.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been writing my articles and just submitting them. I haven't been
Right.
passing them
Well,
to the
yeah.
group, but I think for the town report, I think it's important
Yeah.
that you're good with it.
Absolutely. Okay. New business. We got the LHMP
Yes.
paperwork.
That's gotta be submitted in by January for the big report for FEMA. It's a matching grant, so we'd have to budget in 2,500 for our portion of it. I think it's 10,000 from the state. I'd have to look back on it. It'll take 6 months to know if we're gonna get the grant, and then it'll take a year. We'll have to put it out to bid to have it done. And then it'll take a year to do the whole thing that's needed to be done.
And what is it?
It's the overview of the whole town for emergency management, the best way to put it, really. The detailed, and it's set for, so if we ever had a disaster, we would be set for the FEMA grant, FEMA money.
And we can't get FEMA money unless we
We
have
we
this.
have to do, yes.
Sounds like a great thing for a group of volunteers who feel, you know, strongly about this to get together and help do it. Sounds like it's a lot of
Well,
work.
this money is for somebody to do it for us.
That's
Yeah,
great.
and
This is,
Wyndham Regional has done it in the past.
yes, and it's changed this time around. Normally, they would bid on it.
Mhm.
When I talked to Alyssa, she said, we need to put it out in the newspapers to go out. They don't look at the newspapers, so if we want Wyndham Regional to bid on it, we have to call them to tell them it's out.
Okay. All right. And then usually, there are public hearings to consider
Oh,
different
okay.
things.
Uh-huh,
So
yeah.
there are opportunities for the public to be involved and express their thoughts and concerns.
Great. Well, thanks for following that, Terry.
So I'll fill that out.
So do we need to,
Do we all, since we're all EMDs on this, should we all sign it, or?
I'd say so, yes.
Okay, all right, we can.
So you wanna make a motion to sign that?
So I'll make a motion that we fill out the LMP paperwork to submit for the grant.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we'll all sign that before we leave tonight. Health insurance, we have to sign that paperwork. I talked to Lori about, there's a slight, did you see that in there?
Yeah.
Going with the same thing, there's a
Yes.
slight raise in there, so
Right,
we'll
right.
have to put that into our
Yeah.
budget number, but she
Mhm.
thought they'd be happy with staying with that, so we have to.
And I don't think it was, you know, I think it was Mike that was talking about 25%. I don't
Yeah.
think
Yeah,
it was
no,
25%.
Oh, no,
10
it's not.
point something.
Yeah, it's
It's-
much,
We're on
much
the
lower.
low end of
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
10 to 25, yeah.
Right, so,
Yeah.
Now, so are we going to sign that, or is Lori going to sign that?
we have, I think there's one signature, I have to sign
Okay,
it,
all
but
right.
we have to make a motion to sign that.
Right.
So
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve for Louis to sign the renewal for the health insurance, MVP.
I'll second that.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay, I guess we had it under
Estimate
new,
for the
new
town office?
business instead of road stuff, but that was the estimate we saw.
Yeah.
And we'll be putting that out to some other people now. We gotta find people that actually do that type line of work. I think I
No
know,
idea.
I think some of these pest companies
Ah, that's an
Yeah, that'd be a good idea, yeah.
do it, so. Yeah, I saw that, we'll have to put that on the next agenda. Anything else anybody has to bring up?
Just that I went to the
Oh, yeah.
Shelters Fundamentals course on Monday afternoon, and I've got a thing for everybody to look at, for the American Red Cross, just to give you an overview on it.
Great.
So, it was an interesting course.
It was?
Yeah, it really was. There's a lot of information to be had, but it doesn't mean that we have to have our shelter surveyed by the American Red Cross. I mean, we can always call them in and they'll help us. But it is a slight bit of work to have them come in and go through the building and certify it.
Yeah,
And
So-
what is our shelter?
The
school?
church.
no, the basement of the church.
Church.
The basement of the church is
Yeah.
Dummerston's shelter.
That's one of them,
Yeah.
yes.
But it's an interesting read, if anybody's interested in reading.
Anything else anybody'd like to bring up? Again, guys, I'd like to apologize. I can't believe I let that slip. I was going back and forth with him and we were gonna do it the last meeting and then we decided this meeting and I just let it go. Sorry. All right, motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
I'll second it.
All right, we are adjourned.